Racist boss fires black nurse for speaking up. But what she did next saved his life. The hospital was quiet in the way hospitals only seem to be at 5:47 a.m. Just before the shift changes, just before the alarms start beeping again, just before life and death resume their daily dance. Nurse, Renee Morgan, coffee in hand, stepped off the elevator on the 7th floor of Briarwood Memorial. She moved like someone who had seen it all, but refused to become numb. Her badge swung gently from her scrubs, and the corners of her eyes held those small lines that came from equal parts exhaustion and compassion. She wasn't just experienced. She was respected, and she earned that respect every hour she gave to her patients. Which is why what happened next felt like betrayal wrapped in protocol. 3 days earlier, she had submitted a formal complaint. Nothing dramatic, just a report, typed neatly, listing an incident involving Dr. Preston Hale, chief of cardiology, and an elderly Hispanic patient whose concerns he'd dismissed too casually, too condescendingly. Renee had intervened, translated what the woman was trying to say, and ensured she received the right medication in time. But afterward, the doctor cornered her outside the medication room. "You don't need to get involved when I'm with a patient," he had said in a cold, clipped tone. "It undermines authority." "I didn't undermine anything," she'd replied calmly. "She wasn't being heard. I just made sure she was." He'd looked her up and down in that slow, appraising way. "You're very confident for a nurse." She blinked once. "And you're very arrogant for a cardiologist." That was the end of it, until the morning she was called into HR. The office smelled like air freshener and tension. The HR manager, MS. Linton, didn't look up right away. She just gestured to the chair. "Renee, this won't take long." "That's never a good sign," Renee said, managing a thin smile. Linton folded her hands. "There's been a pattern of disruption, of pushing outside your role, of creating conflict among staff." "A pattern," Renee repeated. "Or a paper trail created by one man with an issue?" "I can't speak to that," Linton said too quickly. "What I can say is that Dr. Hale has expressed concerns about your ability to operate within the structure of his team." "My ability dash?" Renee said, voice tightening. "Or my willingness to let patients be mistreated?" Linton looked uncomfortable. "We're placing you on administrative leave, pending review." There it was. Not fired. Not yet. But silenced. Brushed aside. Made into a problem. Outside the building, the world was already heating up with the morning sun. Renee sat on a bench near the staff parking lot, staring at her hands. The worst part wasn't the injustice. It was the silence from her colleagues. She knew they knew. She'd seen it in their eyes. The discomfort, the sideways glances, the subtle disapproval, not of her actions, but of the fact that she dared to take them. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend and fellow nurse, Diana. "He's done this before. You're just the first to say it out loud." Renee exhaled slowly. "Then I won't be the last." That evening at home, her teenage son Malik stood in the doorway of the kitchen while she stirred pasta she no longer wanted to eat. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice careful. She glanced over, smiled. "I've been better." "Did they really suspend you?" "They call it administrative leave." "But yeah." Malik crossed his arms. "That's messed up. You save lives and they treat you like a problem." "I spoke up when I wasn't supposed to," she said. He tilted his head. "Isn't that exactly when you should speak up?" She didn't answer right away. Then, yes, it is." She spent the next 2 days reviewing state medical board protocols, her employee handbook, and her rights. Not to prepare a lawsuit. She didn't have the stomach for war, but to make sure her name wasn't written out of the story as just another disruption. But then something strange happened. On the third day, she got a call from Dr. Hale's assistant. "He's in the ICU," the woman said, voice shaken. "He collapsed this morning. Cardiac event." Renee's heart skipped. "Why are you calling me?" The voice on the other end hesitated. "He asked for you." The corridors of the ICU felt different than the ones Renee had walked every day for the past decade. It wasn't just the sterile brightness or the hush that hung heavy like fog. It was that today, she wasn't walking them in uniform. She wasn't Nurse Morgan. She was a visitor, a guest, a former employee called back into the very space that had ejected her. The irony wasn't lost on her. Room 708. That's where he was. Dr. Preston Hale, the man who accused her of overstepping, of being a disruption, now lay behind a glass partition surrounded by machines that beeped steadily like ticking clocks measuring out a second chance. She stood at the doorway for a moment, unnoticed. His face looked older, pale. There was a slight tremble in his hand even as he reached for the water on his tray and missed it entirely. The nurse on duty walked right past the room, preoccupied. It took everything in Renee not to step in. But she didn't. Not yet. A soft knock on the window finally drew his attention. He turned his head slowly, and when he saw her, his eyes widened with something that was almost too complex to name. Guilt? Fear? Relief? She entered. "You asked for me," she said quietly. His voice was raspier than she remembered. "You came. You're lucky I still answer unknown numbers." He offered a weak smile, but it faded quickly. "I didn't call to justify anything. I wouldn't expect you to," she said. "I called because I need your help." The words hung in the air like smoke. She pulled up a chair, the leather creaking as she sat. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and regret. "What happened?" she asked. "I passed out during rounds. Felt tightness in my chest, numbness in my arm. I knew what it was, but by the time I got help, I was already sliding under." He paused to breathe. "Ironic, isn't it?" he added. "Heart trouble. The cardiologist." "Ironic would be someone else refusing to hear you," she replied. He winced, not from pain, but from truth. He shifted uncomfortably, then gestured toward the foot of the bed. A folder sat there, thick with notes and printouts. "I had tests done. Some abnormal enzyme levels. Something's off, but they can't pin it down." "You want a nurse's opinion?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I want your opinion," he said without hesitation. "You always saw what others missed, even if you weren't always thanked for it." She took the folder, opened it, flipped through labs, EKGs, vitals, and then she paused. "Have they tested you for Takotsubo?" He blinked. "Stress cardiomyopathy?" "It fits," she said. "Your EKG spikes match. The troponin levels are elevated, but not dramatically. And it would explain why your coronary arteries looked clean in the scan." "I never considered it." "You wouldn't," she said gently. "You don't usually look for things outside your script." He stared at her for a long time, then whispered, "You were never just a nurse." She looked up. "You're right. I'm not." Later that evening, as Renee exited the ICU, Diana was waiting by the vending machines. "You really went in there?" she asked. "I did." "What did he want?" "Answers." "Did you give him any?" "Only the ones he couldn't find on his own." Diana shook her head. You're a better person than me. Renee gave a faint smile. I'm not doing it for him. Then who? She looked toward the elevator, where a mother was holding her sleeping child. A janitor wiped a railing. Somewhere a machine beeped. For the people who still need someone to speak up. That night, Renee couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the hospital, about the way power worked in quiet ways. Through glances, through assumptions, through unchecked authority. But also how healing could begin in quiet places too, in a single diagnosis, in a moment of humility, in choosing to show up even when you're not obligated to. Her phone buzzed again. A message from DR. Hail. They confirmed your diagnosis. Starting treatment tomorrow. Thank you. She stared at the text for a long time. No apology. Not yet. But maybe something had shifted. It started with a whisper in the break room. A nurse, fresh out of grad school, overheard the cardiology resident saying, "Did you hear?" Hale asked her to review his case. Her. Not Nurse Morgan. Not Renee. Her. By lunchtime, 3 other staff members had retold the story. Some were confused. Others were stunned. A few were quietly impressed. But none were ready for what happened next. Because that same afternoon, a patient's daughter tweeted something that would change everything. My mom's nurse was suspended for speaking up. This week, the same doctor who wanted her gone called her in to help save his life. Let that sink in. The tweet went viral by morning. Local reporters started calling. Medical blogs reposted it. The hospital tried to issue a no-comment statement, but it was too late. Someone from Channel 8 News showed up at Renee's apartment complex. "We'd like your side of the story," the journalist said gently, microphone lowered. "People are calling it poetic justice." Renee stared at the camera crew, then at Malik, who stood protectively near the door. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she exhaled. "All right, but I'm going to tell it my way." The interview aired 3 nights later. No dramatization, no shouting. Just Renee, sitting on a simple chair in a sunlit room, telling the truth. "I spoke up because it was the right thing to do. Not because I wanted to cause trouble. But when I saw how Dr. Hale spoke to that patient, how he ignored what she was trying to say, I remembered my mother in that same position years ago. People talked around her, not to her. I promised myself that I'd never let that happen on my watch." The reporter asked gently, "And now that same doctor asked for your help?" Renee nodded. "He did. Did you consider saying no?" She looked off to the side, her eyes calm but clear. "I did. But being a nurse isn't about revenge. It's about responsibility. I helped him not because he deserved it, but because it was needed." By the end of the week, the hospital was in PR crisis mode. Internal staff were demanding answers. A petition to reinstate Renee had passed 5,000 signatures in 24 hours. Former patients wrote in. So did former employees who had left quietly after similar treatment. The board called an emergency meeting. In a surprising turn, Dr. Hale himself submitted a letter public, hand-signed. In it, he admitted to allowing bias and ego to cloud his judgment. He didn't use the word racism. He didn't have to. It was in every line. He called for her reinstatement, called her an asset this hospital never deserved, but deeply needs, called her the voice I should have listened to sooner. The next day, Renee received a formal letter. She was reinstated. Not only that, she was offered a role as senior patient advocate with full authority to monitor, investigate, and escalate any cases of mistreatment, communication breakdown, or ethical conflict. She accepted, but only after one condition: I want mandatory training for every department head, she told the board. Not just about race, about listening. They agreed. That night, Diana visited her. You did it, she said, eyes wide with pride. No, Renee said. We did it. Everyone who's ever been told to stay in their lane. Everyone who's been punished for caring too much. This isn't a win for me. It's a beginning. Malik, who'd overheard from the hallway, grinned. You're kind of famous now. Renee laughed. Let's just hope that helps someone else find their voice. But just when it seemed everything was settling down, an unexpected visitor appeared at the hospital. A woman, mid-50s, well-dressed, stern. I'm Dr. Hale's sister, she said. I'm here to speak to Nurse Morgan. Renee approached cautiously. Is everything all right? The woman's expression softened, but only slightly. He told me everything. I came to say thank you. But also, she hesitated. You saved his life, yes, but I think you also changed it. And that scares him more than anything. The new office was too quiet, too clean. Renee sat behind a desk that didn't feel like hers, staring out over the parking lot below. Her name was freshly engraved on a doorplate that read, Senior Patient Advocate R. Morgan. It should have felt like a triumph. It didn't, because ever since the interview aired, the attention hadn't stopped. Emails from strangers, thank yous from patients she'd never met, requests for podcasts, panels, guest talks. Malik thought it was cool. Diana joked she should start charging for wisdom. But with every new "you're an inspiration," Renee felt another inch pulled away from who she used to be. A nurse, a quiet presence, the person beside the bed when no one else knew what to say. Now they saw her as a symbol, and symbols are hard to live as. The hospital halls buzzed differently now when she walked through. Some smiled at her, like she'd done something heroic. Others avoided her gaze, wary, like she might expose their next mistake. One day, she stepped into the elevator just as Dr. Hale was stepping out. They both froze. Renee, he said softly. Doctor, she nodded. He glanced around. Can I speak to you? Just for a minute. They walked to the end of the corridor, near the old supply closet she used to organize herself, back when no one remembered it existed. I haven't said it, he began, because I wasn't sure how. But thank you. She crossed her arms, not cold, just guarded. For saving your life? She asked. For everything, he said, including not humiliating me publicly when you had every right to. I didn't do it for you. I know that, but it doesn't make it mean less. He leaned against the wall, wincing slightly. Recovery wasn't linear. He was thinner now, slower. I've started therapy, he added. I never thought I needed it. I thought I had control. But control isn't the same as care. She studied him for a moment. People assume apology is the hardest part. It's not. He raised a brow. No, no, she said. The hardest part is deciding what to do after the apology. That afternoon, a patient came in, an elderly man with limited English, recently transferred from another hospital. The ER was backed up, the staff was stretched thin, and the admitting physician was growing impatient. I don't have time to figure out what he's saying, the doctor snapped, flipping through a chart. Just get someone from social services. Renee, passing by, stopped cold. She walked into the room, gently took the man's hand, and said, Espir, stoyaki. His eyes lit up. He nodded slowly. She turned back to the doctor. We make time, or we make mistakes. The physician blinked. You speak Spanish? No, she replied, pulling out her phone's translator app. But I listen. That night, at home, Malik was on the couch, headphones in, scrolling TikTok. Someone posted a video edit of you with dramatic music, he said, not looking up. It has like 200K views. Renee chuckled. Lord, you're basically a movie character now. She paused, thoughtful. Feels more like a responsibility than a spotlight. Maybe that's what makes it real. He looked up at her. You okay, Mom? She nodded. I'm getting there. Then, more quietly, it's strange. I was just trying to do my job. Now people look at me like I became my job. Maybe, Malik said, you just reminded them what the job's supposed to be. A week later, the hospital held its first mandatory training session. It was awkward at first. People shuffled in, arms crossed, prepared to sit through another HR script. But Renee didn't read from slides. She didn't use buzzwords or shame tactics. She told stories, real ones. She spoke of a patient who cried because someone finally explained a procedure in words they understood. Of a night when a janitor noticed a bed alarm before a nurse did and saved a fall. Of a black teen misdiagnosed twice until someone finally asked, "What does he think he's feeling?" The room fell silent more than once. At the end, Dr. Hale stood up. "I'm not your enemy," he said to the group. "I once acted like I was. But she taught me that it's not enough to be brilliant if you're not willing to see people." The room exhaled. And for the first time, so did Renee. It was a rainy Tuesday when she got the letter. No hospital seal. No return address. Just her name, written carefully in blue ink. Inside, a single page, handwritten. "You don't know me, but you helped my grandmother when no one else would." She didn't speak much English and she was scared, and they were treating her like she didn't matter. But you sat with her. You let her hold your hand. I was 14 then. I never forgot. I just graduated nursing school. You're the reason I'm here. There was no signature. Just one line at the end. Now it's my turn to speak up. Renee folded the letter slowly, her hands trembling more than they used to. And for the first time in weeks, she cried not out of frustration or anger, but from something deeper. Relief, hope, maybe even healing. At Briarwood Memorial, the culture had begun to shift. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. Doctors now paused longer before dismissing a concern. Nurses met together not just to vent, but to strategize. Patient feedback was no longer a checkbox on a form, it was a compass. Renee's role had grown not in title but in meaning. She wasn't just an advocate. She was the hospital's conscience. One morning, as she sipped coffee in the corner of the staff lounge, Dr. Hale walked in. He looked healthier, straighter, lighter somehow. "I heard you got a letter," he said. Renee raised an eyebrow. "You reading my mail now?" He smiled. "No. The girl who sent it, she applied to our hospital. She's starting her residency here in July." Something caught in Renee's throat. He continued, "She requested to shadow under you. Said, quote, I want to learn from the woman who reminded the world what nursing means." Renee closed her eyes, just for a moment, and let the quiet gratitude settle into her bones. Later that day, she stood at the edge of the pediatric unit, watching as a young nurse adjusted a little girl's fore with incredible care. She could see herself there 25 years ago, when the scrubs felt too big and the system too heavy. Now she didn't feel small. She felt like a force. That evening, she stepped out into the rain. Not rushed, not heavy, just soft, steady drops, like the world was cleansing itself. Malik was waiting by the car. "You good?" he asked. She nodded. Yeah, I think I finally am. He opened the door for her, and as she got in, he smiled. You know, Mom, you didn't just save one man's life. She glanced at him. You saved all of us. In your own way. Renee looked out the window as they pulled away. The hospital lights blurred behind raindrops. But something clearer had formed in her mind. She had always thought her job was to speak up for those who couldn't. But now, she realized something greater. She was teaching them to speak for themselves.